So what happens when two third-generation Arizona women authors who are passionate about their state start talking about experiences, insights, and memories of different places? They don't stop talking. They write a book, and then they start a podcast. Welcome to Celebrating Arizona with Julie Morrison and Lisa Schnebley-Heidinger. Grab your favorite drink and settle in. We're celebrating Arizona, going everywhere from A to Z. And we're off.
And we're back with Celebrating Arizona, all the way from A to Z, with me, Lisa Schnebley-Heidinger, and
Julie Morrison. Hello.
And delighted to be here. This is number 3, show 3, and I'm doing something a little different I'm excited about. I don't know if you're doing anything different, but you're excited, right?
Yes, I'm excited without novelty. Or maybe because the whole thing is novel, but my excitement stays high. But what do you got? What's new?
Okay, let's see. So we are going to kind of an abridged Apache County, Navajo County. And this is a little bit different than the other two because I'm dipping a cautious toe into some history for the first time. I have a list of show topics, and one of them mentioned a sheriff, and I thought, yeah, but that doesn't mention Gary Butler, and Gary Butler's cool. And when I went back to make sure I knew what I was talking about with Gary Butler, I went down a rabbit hole that fascinated me about not only Gary Butler, but one of my other favorite sheriffs from that area, Commodore Perry Owen.
Can we ask, was Commodore his given first name?
Yes, and
Because, truly, the last time I have heard it spoken was in Pirates of the Caribbean.
Okay, well, and that, of course, came after this guy. He was named by his father for Commodore Perry, who had been a hero in the War of 1812. Now, our Commodore was born in 1852. He left home at 13 and came west. And he supported himself first by becoming a buffalo hunter for the railroad. His expertise was legendary because he could shoot accurately a rifle from the hip. So imagine being able to, and I don't think he could have stood on the roof of a train and done that. I think that shooting became an avocation for him. He was also ambidextrous and could shoot from the hip with 2 pistols. I didn't know there were U.S. Indian agents who arrested Commodore Owens, and he was acquitted for wrestling. Now, that leads me to a plethora of questions about, is that because the closest law enforcement agent of any type was Dennis Matthew as an Indian agent? Did he wrestle the Indians, Navajos, cattle? We know too little in some respects. On the other hand, I'll never get to the story any other way. So he is acquitted. Okay. He then runs for sheriff 2 years later, 1883, and he wins. He's elected. I don't think I knew how many votes got him elected, but he did. Oh, no. He won in 1886, pardon me. And so that was 3 years after his little brush with the law as a Reardon. So he's had 3 years to put that behind him, the ugly history of having been acquitted, although maybe that's not ugly history, and he's elected sheriff. Now, the predecessor, so second braid entry, is Juan, quote, Don Lorenzo Hubble. He had been the sheriff of Apache County before Commodore Perry Owens comes into the seat. Now, I don't know if Lorenzo Hubble was too busy trading to really do his job like a pro, or if every sheriff leaves some unserved bench warrants for the next guy or not. I've never asked a sheriff these questions. But he left 14 bench warrants unserved. Enter the third element of the braid. If I say Ike Clanton, does anything come to mind?
No bells.
Okay. Ike Clanton was one of the Clanton brothers. Does that take you closer?
Nope, still no bells.
Okay, they were in the gunfight at the OK Corral. Now, Ike had been cattle wrestling in Apache County and was quoted as saying, ranching is, quote, very profitable when you don't have to buy the cows. So he was really not trying to stay under wraps. He was being very blatant and probably deserved to be collected. So Commodore Perry sends Rawhide Jake Brighton. Rawhide Jake. I love this. And
yeah, no doubt.
Range Detective Burt Miller.
Okay, we love that.
Quote,
yes.
A Secret Service officer hired by the The Cattlemen's Association.
Oh, wow.
And isn't your father a proud, at least former member of the Cattlemen's Association?
Oh, yeah. When we were ranching, we were part of Yavapai County Cattle Growers, Arizona Cattle Growers. Yes.
Yeah.
That association is alive and well and does not appreciate rustling. So,
But to your knowledge, do they still hire Secret Service officers?
well, now how would I know that if they're secret?
Because you would look at the budgets every year at the annual meeting.
Okay, yeah.
And, they would tell
And I
you.
was definitely not in leadership in cattle growers. So, okay, all joking aside, no idea.
Okay.
But what a great title.
Yeah, so Rawhide Jake and Range Detective Bert go out, and at least according to the account I read, they're the guys who get into a gunfight with Ike Clanton and finally end his life.
Wow.
So all these interesting people are moving around through history together. Commodore Perry Owens ends up retiring and moving to Seligman after.
Okay.
Well, let's see, what year was that?
Now we're going west. We've been jumping around here. We're now in Navajo Apache County. Then we have a bad guy from Tombstone, and now one of our heroes moves over to Seligman. Okay,
Yes,
I've got the
isn't
map.
that great?
Okay.
So again, all these beautiful braids. The reason I thought worthy of mention that he, after retiring in 1888, moved to Seligman was that he opened a general store and saloon and didn't die till 1919. But Commodore Perry's Seligman home is still there.
Oh, interesting.
And there are pictures online of it painted blue with Banksia roses. So talk about degrees of separation. There are,
and Banksia roses are the ones in Tombstone.
that's right. Did we both buy one, or did I
Yes.
buy you one? Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So back to Tombstone. The braid is getting
Yes.
very unwieldy. I'm not good at this many strands.
Yes.
But isn't
It's
it
many
lovely
strands.
how many things can connect?
Sure.
So now we're going to fast forward, and I like the synergy that Perry was in office in 1888 until he wasn't, and 1988 is the year that, wait for it, Gary Butler was elected Navajo County Sheriff. 100
No,
years
we
later.
need some connective tissue here.
Okay.
Why is Gary Butler important to Commodore Owens?
Because actually he's not. Commodore Perry died and may have never learned of Gary Butler, but Gary Butler was a third-generation law enforcement Arizona officer, and he was a huge fan of Commodore Perry Owens.
Oh, interesting.
And
okay.
his
Okay.
granddad, Ray Butler, was the first Navajo County sheriff to build a jail in Pine Top or Show Low. Because up to that point, if a sheriff arrested a lawbreaker in that area, their only choice was to handcuff them to a pine tree.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So we pause to honor Ray Butler for creating more humane conditions for inmates. Gary Butler, when he took office, designed a new badge to replicate the original worn by Commodore Owens' top deputy.
Okay.
Now, Gary Butler was an amazing guy and a sweetheart and a neat person, and he was in office for 20 years. And so 1988 to 2000.
88 to 08. Okay.
And I met him in 1989 when my very first story at the Channel 3 Northern Arizona Bureau for KTVK-TV3 was a jailbreak on August 14th,
Oh my
1989. And Mike Schmidt and I went over, and Mike didn't even have a tripod yet. They were going to give us some time to get our feet under us and get our supplies. And that day there was a jailbreak. And I think Schmidt heard about it on the scanner and called the desk in Phoenix and said, hey, there's a jailbreak in Navajo County Jail. And they said, go, go, go. And we went. And I think we were live on air that night with an interview with very gracious and very quotable Sheriff Gary Butler of Navajo County, who said, I won't sleep till he's captured. And also, when Rodeo Chetaskai, you remember the big fire? The huge fire?
Yes.
Personal history.
White Mountains area, yeah.
That set a record for the longest Tom, as satellite truck driver for Channel 3, was away from us. He was gone a record 17 days during Rodeo Chetaskai.
I believe it.
And,
that was a terrifying
it was a huge fire. And Gary Butler, his part in Rodeo Chetaskai is twofold. One, he was too good a sheriff trying to protect people's property and drove through a wall of fire to get out. just gunned it and drove
Oh
through.
my.
That-
Don't try this at home.
Do not
kids.
try this at home. Do not try this
Yeah.
anywhere. Don't try this on
Yeah.
vacation. Don't try this staying with relatives. But it beat the alternative in this case because he didn't even melt his tires. He drove so fast he didn't even melt his tires, and it was his only choice. And he also said he was the first sheriff in Arizona to swear in 50 military police officers as deputy to have over 300 people protecting property during Rodeo Chediskai.
Wow, interesting.
So we're going to go to a break. When we come back, Julie Morrison's short but marvelous story.
Okay, sounds good.
Not to set the bar too high.
I'm Kathy Goshert, and when I want a simple, fun, and delicious breakfast, I head to Ava Bakery, a small Persian restaurant hiding in a strip mall on 7th Street in Union Hills. It's much more than a breakfast place or a bakery, however. Their menu features many authentic Persian choices. My favorite is the Persian breakfast, which is stone-fire bread, fresh toppings in tiny bowls, and strong Persian tea. They also have kebabs, plates, sandwiches, saffron ice cream, and much more. Everything I've tried there is delicious, and I highly recommend stopping by Ava Bakery.
And we're back. And this is Julie Morrison, and I am here with...
Lisa Schnobly-Heidinger,
So happy to be.
and I to be with you.
Yes. And so it's time for my destination, and I am going to take you today to Sabino Canyon. And we are actually going to park the car because we cannot drive into Sabino Canyon, and we have to walk in, and we will walk up the hill.
Wait. Before we do,
Okay.
and I'm
Yes.
eager to go. I was born in Tucson. You have lived in Tucson. We are daughters and aficionados of Tucson. So we know that Sabino is to the east in the foothills of the Catalinas. But you might want to tell people who aren't us a little bit about it, including if you know how many river crossings there are. Because I ran that canyon a ton of times with Linz and Lair. And every time Larry and I ran it, we would try to count river crossings, and we would get so fuddled from exhaustion and exertion, we never remembered.
So, no, I can provide none of that.
Okay. I think there are 7. So maybe somebody wants to write us at celebratingaz.com and tell us how many river crossings are in Sabino Canyon.
What I can tell you is that once you park and walk up the hill and over the hill and now down the hill, and the creek has opened up to your east side, and you are looking at the treetops of cottonwoods when you have just previously been looking at saguaros. I mean, it is though you've gone from one room to another. It's that fast. And so now we're on the cottonwoods and creek part of the road, and we head down and we curve around a couple of times. And by the way, we are here when the creek is running, because what I've been thinking about is the water and how magical it is to stand.
Now, does the creek ever not run? Because I thought it
yeah.
always ran.
Oh yeah, no, there are some dry summer months when it's a wee trickle.
I've
That
never
there's
been
just
there when
not
it wasn't
much.
running. Wow.
Yeah, there might still be some water pooled here and there, but it does get much dry. So like say we're there in like
See how much we learned doing this?
early spring-ish. And so but there is a place you can stand, and there's one bridge that has like dragon teeth along the sides
I
of it.
know what you're talking about.
And then there are other bridges that are not quite so jagged in their tops. And there's one where you can stand and the water is just high enough as you look north, and that it feels, and then is falling behind you, that it feels as though you are standing midstream, even though you're standing on roadway and your feet are not in the water. It feels very much as though you have waded in and you are part of this water course.
Field trip, field trip, field trip.
This is the most powerful feeling, or has been for me. And I tend to think water is magic.
Water is
anyway.
magic.
I am fascinated by water. This may sound funny, and you may think like you really need to get out more, but it seems to me that sort of the most basic of elements hold some of the most interesting worlds that we haven't even touched: air, water, light,
Well, and to that point, I mean, isn't the ocean our last unexplored frontier? Aren't there? I think we know less about the ocean than we know more about the ocean?
Seems right.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't write much poetry. You are the poet among us. But I remember writing "All water is kin," whether it's a fountain, the ocean. I mean, all those molecules come and go, evaporate, rain. So, no, I'm right there with you on water.
Okay, well, I'm writing that down. All water is kin. We got to figure out who said that. I have a quote from T.S. Oh, okay.
If somebody else said it, I'm still taking credit for my poem because I didn't hear it anywhere else.
Okay, excellent. Well, we're good. So, anyway, that's where I wanted to go this week.
And why would that be?
Well, it's okay. I mean, it's July, the weather.
Do I really need any other reason?
Like, it's dry, the heat is scary, and relief feels so far away. And to stand in the middle of that flow was an experience in abundance.
Oh, one of my favorite words, abundance. Abundance and options.
And humility, I think. I mean, just that,
Say more about that.
It felt water is ancient. There is no new water on this earth. There will never be any new water. It's cycles. So, and because I am an animist and tend to think that alive or not, things have souls, water to me, I think, carries much more than we know. Has could have all kinds of memories.
Oh, I love that idea. Well,
Yeah.
and if we are all formed from stardust, then the compounds, the elements that first came to us, would water arguably be formed from stardust as well?
Oh, I know that the carbon came from stars. Where did the hydrogen and water come from? Probably same. Apologies to all scientists ever.
Who are yelling.
This is a poet speaking.
No, this way they get to feel smart, Julie. You're doing them a favor.
As if they needed help. But anyway, so without going into the origin of the elements, what I know is that's a very powerful experience. And I've been thinking about it. And of course, and so my reading today is in talking about Tucson, and there are a couple of lines about Sabino Canyon in there.
Oh, gorgeous.
It is going to relate because it's also a place that I love, and that is a place that restores me to myself. And you might ask, where did you go?
No.
And I would love to know that too.
I did not ask. I think if there's anybody out there listening who has never felt restored to themselves, then write us.
Then go there.
Well, or go there. Yeah,
go
absolutely.
there.
No, I think everybody understands feeling need of restoration. I think that's pretty universal. Can I say one far less poetic thing about Sabino Canyon?
Please do.
I was there when I worked at Kagan with a photographer named Clyde Kirkpatrick, who was the guy who said there's nothing as noble or as tragic as a
one man's dream.
Yeah, so here's Clyde back.
Okay.
We were up there and he said, okay, I'm just about to show you one of my favorite signs. You know how the international language of signage can say various things. Wavy road.
Yes.
And he said, and this one's going to say, if you're on a bike, don't go too fast because you may hit something and go head over heels off the front of your bike and the front tire is going to blow. And sure enough, the signs in Sabino Canyon say in one simple illustration exactly that.
That your fall isn't a problem for you, it's a problem for your bike?
Oh, it's also a problem for you because you're headed for some very bad places. But to add insult to injury, if you do survive it, you're going to get up and your front tire is going to be bent to smithereens.
You're not riding away.
You're not riding away.
Okay.
Even if you can ride, your bike probably can't carry you.
Okay, and so with that, listeners, do not ride away. Come back very shortly. We will do our readings for you.
Beautifully done.
This is Julie wanting to say a big thank you to the bookstores who have had my memoir, Barbed, a Memoir, on their shelves. It is, of course, available from Solstice Publishing in Flagstaff, but it has been or is on shelves and changing hands in Tempe, Antigone Books in Tucson, Brightside Books in Flagstaff, Peregrine Books in Prescott, and Barnes & Noble in Tempe and Chandler. Thank you so much, booksellers.
Welcome back to Celebrating Arizona, or From A to Z, with Lisa Schnobly-Heidinger and
Julie Morrison.
And we don't have to do that every time, I guess. That could get a little
Okay, we are still ourselves that we know of, but check back with us.
And we don't plan to ever not be us, so we could probably drop that over time.
I suppose so.
All right, so before we read, today's mug, the mug of the day, is a classy little Western thing. It has cowboy boots of many colors, and partly because I'm being a little male-centric in this show. Did you ever go to Cowgirl Up in Wickenburg?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
I got this year at Cowgirl Up. The art show that they started in response to the fact that Cowboy Artists of America did shows at the Herd that women were not allowed to be in.
Yeah. No, I went to see cowboy art in Wickenburg, and I have heard you tell the story of Cowgirl Up, and I put them together in my mind, and they never were anywhere other than my mind. So, but amazing.
Amazing.
Yes.
My brother-in-law, Pete Campbell, and I would go every year, and whatever else we were alike in, we had a perfect museum pace. You know how if you're in a museum, somebody's too slow. Larry and I were not museum paced. He would have spent 12 times longer at every exhibit than I would have spent. But Pete and I were just in lockstep. And then we would give out awards. Try this, listeners at home, if you think it's fun. We'd look at the whole show, and then we would each pick first, second, third, and honorable mention at Cowgirl.
Oh, fun.
And
Very
so
fun.
the mug is a wonderful memory of going to Cowgirl Up with Pete. And I'm told that Cowgirl Up was so successful that the Cowboy Artists of America at some point maybe lost their privilege to be at the Herd, and they now do a show with men and women in it.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's the mug of the day. And
Okay.
I think you want to read?
Well, yes, and let's just pause for a question about the question. Usually we would have a question for discussion. Do we want to do that, or do we want to maybe save it for next time?
Leave the listeners wanting more?
Sure.
You know what? Why I think that's a really lovely idea is that because I tend to be a little OCD. I'll confess right now to you and everybody else that I wish I didn't always know how many steps I've taken, how good my gas mileage is, how many calories I've had. So the idea of us not being rigid about everything we have to do the same every time is very appealing to me.
Okay. Then the answer to the question is that there will be no question today. We will question things another day.
We'll put a pin in that for next week. I think that's lovely of you. So now you can read.
Okay, very good. Well, as I said earlier, Sabino Canyon, water made me think of Sabino Canyon, made me think of Tucson. I saw years ago that our state poet laureate, Alberto Rios, wrote a double sonnet about the border. And if you haven't seen it, Google it, find it, read it, print it, put it on your wall. His language is wonderful. His images are compelling. And this is going to be... Look, there's a reason why he's poet laureate. So let's applaud that, and now take your expectations down. But I loved the form of the double sonnet.
And tell me what a double sonnet would be. How would that be different than a sonnet?
Yeah. So usually a sonnet is going to be 14 lines. You're going to have there are varying ways of doing it, but you're going to have 3 groups of 4 lines, and then you're going to have a couplet at the end. What Alberto Rios did is give us 28 lines that don't necessarily rhyme, that don't necessarily have meter. And I think he did that because, one of his lines in the poem about the border is, "The border sounds like order, but there it doesn't rhyme." And so I think he takes
Sonnets
sort of that idea.
Aren't pentameter, though?
They usually, yes. Okay. But it's as with everything, know the rules and then know when to break them.
Understood.
And let's say that Tucson is one of the most selective and strategically thinking places I have found when it comes to quote unquote rules. And so, not Tucson as a municipality, but sort of the culture in Tucson.
More about the spirit of the law
Thinks
than
for
the letter.
themselves. Yes. And so, so here we have Tucson refrain.
I can't wait.
A double sonnet. Tucson is a saguaro in a cowboy hat, knowing either could be wearing the other. Tucson is the Sabino part of the canyon, origin unknown and accepted as local. Tucson is the stuck-on letters that make traffic signs into satire. Tucson is the rolling R in arroyo. Tucson worked hard to make captain, then discovered it doesn't like managing troops. Tucson is the bats choosing to live under the bridge with the highest traffic counts in town. Tucson is also the haze of gnats, hunted by the bats as they swarm towards sunset. Tucson is grandmother's belt of silver conchos today's teenager feels is too formal. Tucson is the spark of red hummingbird throat caught, then mistaken for a camera flash. Tucson is dancing the robot to clear space for a wheelchair-bound friend under a disco ball. Tucson is trying for the perfect plank in goat yoga, not for photos, but the good of the goat. Tucson is the tug at the corner of your mouth when someone mispronounces enchilada. Tucson is the bells you can't see, even though their chimes keep time for you. Tucson is scarred by the skeletal outline of its state's sunken ship. Tucson is equally proud and disappointed you haven't heard of it. Tucson is having to remember where you put your winter coat. Tucson is a crosswalk every quarter mile across the street named Speedway. Tucson is the heart that will not be stopped nor embittered by a gunman. Tucson is realizing the buzzard taking your measure from its studied circles is actually a hawk. Tucson is rows of salsa jars at the corner market, but only one kind of spaghetti sauce. Tucson asks how you met and doesn't care to ask what you do. Tucson is a sky island floating in an arid sea. Tucson is the tingle on your tongue and not your palms when someone says prickly pear. Tucson is the punchline that's more memorable than the comedian. Tucson's learned to expect its streams will only run seasonally. Tucson is rattlesnake avoidance training for dogs, but ever-expanding homes in the foothills. Tucson is space mirrors manufactured across the block from a generations-old tamale shop. Tucson is a bloom much like a cactus flower, best enjoyed without picking at it. And there we are.
Gad, woman, you can write. Oh,
I had fun with that.
And I kept thinking, I'm so glad that was a double sonnet. I would have hated to miss half of this.
Oh, that's very generous. That is very generous. My goodness.
Fun. If this podcast doesn't get you a major book deal, I'll be very surprised. That is stunning. And guess what? My reading is very short.
See, and there we are. Okay. So this is, yes. Okay, we've got it.
We're back at you. This is just a paragraph, but I love the last line, and I chose it because it's by another sheriff, and I'm sure I'll talk about him someday, but right now, just know that Sheriff Joe Richards was Coconino County Sheriff for a ridiculously long time, and when I talk about him on another show, I'll tell you how long it was. I don't know right now. But I wrote about him in a book called Only at NAU, which was for NAU. And he was a graduate. And so I love his last line. Sheriff Joe Richards in Only at NAU. Retired in 2004, Richards may be as busy as he's ever been. He still does ranch patrol as a volunteer for his old department. He teaches informal gun safety classes to friends and acquaintances. In a sunlit studio, Richards also paints meticulous studies in rich tones of the matchless scenery around Flagstaff. In keeping with his Western bones, he loves to help out on roundups, cattle drives, and riding fence for area ranches. And when he could be laurel resting at this point, Richards also still seeks out history lessons. Quote, "Stories of our past and the things that went on provide a richness. History is a kind of true north for what I feel about things."
Ooh. Ooh.
Isn't he nice?
That is quite a quote.
Yeah.
History is a true north for how I feel about things. You know, it's interesting because I totally disagree, but there's gorgeous poetry in that thought. And how marvelous.
Good. And someday then
Yes.
we're going to circle back and find out why you disagree. But right now we're on the long side, so we will also put a pin in that one, I suppose.
We will,
Okay.
but thank you for, thank you for celebrating sheriffs. These are people who probably do not hear enough thank yous.
A nice point. Thank you to sheriffs everywhere.
Yes, indeed.
All right.
And yes, and thanks to you, and we will be back again.
And thanks to our listeners, and if you feel like subscribing and writing good reviews, thanks for that too. All right, see you next time.
Bye for now.
We'd really like to hear from you about anything this show led you to think about. Write to us at celebratingaz.com. The wizard behind making a conversation into a podcast is Tom Heidinger. The music comes from Daniel Blatney. And I'm Dana Cooper.